Alright, let me take you on a spine-chilling journey into a forest that'll make your hair stand on end. This wasn't your run-of-the-mill woods, no sir. It was a place where the shadows seemed to dance with malevolence, where the silence was so thick you could practically taste it. Picture it, towering trees, their branches intertwining like gnarled fingers, blocking out the sun. The forest floor was a carpet of fallen leaves, their colors muted and faded. It was the kind of place that made you question whether you were really alone. So there I was, trudging along the winding path, my footsteps muffled by the thick layer of leaves. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and decaying vegetation. It was like the forest itself was breathing, a living, pulsating entity. As I ventured deeper, a sense of foreboding settled over me. It was like a weight on my chest, a silent warning that this was no ordinary forest. I could feel eyes on me, unseen watchers in the shadows. My steps quickened, my heart pounding in my chest. I tried to shake off the unease, telling myself it was just my imagination. But then I saw them, shadows, moving amidst the trees, like phantoms in the night. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The shadows seemed to take form, dark and shapeless, swirling like a malevolent mist. I could feel their gaze on me, cold and unrelenting. Panic surged through me, my fight-or-flight response kicking in. I turned and sprinted down the path, branches scraping at my arms and leaves crunching beneath my feet. I could hear the shadows moving, slithering through the underbrush, gaining on me. I dared not look back, my mind a whirlwind of terror. I pushed myself harder, my lungs burning, my heart threatening to burst from my chest. It was like a nightmare, the forest closing in around me, suffocating me. And then, just as I felt like I couldn't run another step, I burst through the trees and into a small clearing. I stumbled to a stop, my breath racked, my chest heaving. The shadows seemed to retreat, as if held at bay by some invisible force. I took a moment to catch my breath, my eyes scanning the clearing. It was like a sanctuary amidst the malevolence of the forest. The ground was soft and mossy, and in the center stood an old, gnarled oak tree, its branches reaching for the sky. As I approached the tree, a strange calm settled over me. It was like the tree was a guardian, a beacon of safety in this haunted realm. I reached out and placed my hand on its weathered trunk, a silent thanks for its protection. But then, as I turned to leave the clearing, I heard it. A soft, melodic hum, barely audible, like a lullaby carried on the wind. I spun around, my heart in my throat. There, at the edge of the clearing, stood a figure cloaked in darkness. My breath caught, my limbs frozen. It was like a spectre, its form shifting and indistinct. I could feel its gaze on me, a weighty, oppressive presence. "You should not have come here," it murmured, its voice a low, haunting whisper. I tried to speak, to ask who or what it was, but my voice failed me. The figure took a step forward, the shadows swirling around it. I could see now that its eyes were pools of darkness, devoid of any light or life. In that moment, I knew this was no ordinary forest. It was a place of ancient, dark magic, a realm where the line between the living and the dead blurred. With a surge of newfound courage, I turned and fled, my footsteps echoing through the forest. The shadow seemed to follow, a silent, relentless pursuit. I pushed myself harder, my body screaming in protest. And then, just when I thought I couldn't run any further, I burst through the trees and onto a familiar path. The forest stood behind me, an oppressive wall of darkness. I stumbled to a stop, my breath coming in racked gasps. I turned to look back one last time, half expecting to see the figure emerge from the shadows, but there was nothing, just the silent, watchful trees. As I walked away from that haunted forest, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had glimpsed something beyond the realms of the living. It was a place of ancient power, a realm where the boundary between reality and the supernatural was paper thin. And here's the twist, the revelation that sent shivers down my spine. When I returned home and looked in the mirror, I saw them, shadows lurking just behind me, their eyes gleaming with malevolence. They were no longer confined to the forest. They were with me, always watching, always waiting. All right, gather round, because I've got a tale that'll make your skin crawl. It was a crisp autumn day when I decided to take a hike through a forest that had a reputation. You know the kind I'm talking about, the trees that whisper secrets, the shadows that seem to move on their own. As I stepped into the forest, the air grew heavy with the scent of damp earth and fallen leaves. The canopy above filtered the sunlight into a mosaic of golden beams, dappling the forest floor. It was the kind of place that would be enchanting if it weren't for the feeling that I was being watched. I pressed on, my boots crunching on the carpet of leaves. The trees loomed overhead, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. It wasn't long before I started to notice it, a subtle shift in the atmosphere. It was like the forest had a pulse of its own, a rhythm that didn't quite match the beat of my heart. I tried to shake off the unease, chalking it up to an overactive imagination. But then it started. Whispers, just at the edge of hearing, like the murmur of distant voices. I spun around, but there was no one there, just the trees, their trunks standing tall and silent. I shook my head, trying to convince myself it was the wind playing tricks, but the whispers persisted, growing louder and more insistent. It was like the forest itself was trying to tell me something I wasn't sure I wanted to hear. As I ventured deeper, the shadows seemed to grow darker, more pronounced. It was like they had a life of their own, moving and shifting with an eerie purpose. My heart raced, my breath coming faster. I could feel a knot of unease tightening in my chest. I tried to keep my cool, to tell myself it was just my imagination. But then it happened. A rustling in the underbrush, just out of sight. I turned, my heart in my throat, but there was nothing there. Just the forest, stretching out in all directions. I quickened my pace, my footsteps echoing through the silence. Every snap of a twig, every distant caw of a bird seemed amplified, like the forest itself was closing in around me. I could feel a growing sense of paranoia gnawing at the edges of my mind. And then, just as I thought I couldn't take it anymore, I stumbled upon it, a small clearing bathed in an ethereal light. In the center stood an ancient, gnarled tree, its branches reaching out like a twisted canopy. It was both beautiful and unsettling, like a relic from another time. I approached the tree, my hand reaching out to touch its rough bark. It was cold to the touch, sending a shiver up my spine. I could feel a strange energy emanating from it, like an electrical charge in the air. As I stood there, a voice seemed to echo in my mind, soft and melodic. It was like a lullaby, soothing and haunting all at once. I couldn't make out the words, but the message was clear. I wasn't welcome here. I stumbled back, my heart pounding in my chest. The forest seemed to close in around me, the shadows growing more sinister. I turned and fled, my footsteps echoing through the underbrush. It was like a nightmare, the forest itself conspiring against me. I ran until my legs threatened to give out, my breath ragged and labored. Finally, I burst through the trees and back into the familiar daylight. I collapsed to the ground, gasping for air, my heart still pounding. As I lay there, trying to catch my breath, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that clung to me. The forest had affected me in a way I couldn't explain. It was like it had gotten inside my head, playing tricks on my senses, filling me with a sense of paranoia. And here's the twist, the revelation that turned my world upside down. When I finally made it back home, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me. Shadows seemed to dance at the edge of my vision, just out of reach. I could hear whispers in the silence of my own home, voices that weren't there. I tried to tell myself it was just my imagination, that the forest had left a mark on me, but deep down I knew I had brought something back with me, something that defied explanation. The forest had left its mark, and now I was forever changed. All right, gather round, because I've got a tale that will send shivers down your spine. This happened a few years back, but trust me, it's etched in my memory like it happened yesterday. It all started on a chilly autumn afternoon when my buddy Jake dared me to venture into the notorious Blackwood Forest. Now, let me set the scene. The forest was dense, and the trees loomed overhead like ancient sentinels, their branches casting long, gnarled shadows on the forest floor. It was the kind of place that made you feel small and insignificant, like a trespasser in a realm that didn't belong to you. So there I was, trudging through the underbrush, leaves crunching beneath my boots. The air was damp and carried the earthy scent of decaying leaves. It was all normal forest stuff, until it wasn't. As I ventured deeper, the air seemed to grow thicker, like a heavy fog settling around me. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end, and a strange unease settled in the pit of my stomach. It was like the forest was holding its breath, waiting for something. And then it started, the whispering. At first, it was just a faint murmur, like the wind rustling through the leaves. But then it grew louder, more distinct. It was like the forest itself was trying to speak to me, trying to tell me something. The hairs on my arms prickled, and a shiver ran down my spine. I shook my head, trying to brush it off as a trick of the wind, but the whispers persisted, growing more urgent, more insistent. It was like they were trying to claw their way into my mind, to make me understand. I quickened my pace, trying to put some distance between me and the eerie voices. Every step felt like a sprint, my heart pounding in my chest. The shadows seemed to dance and sway, taking on life of their own. I could feel my pulse in my temples, my breath coming in racked gasps. The forest seemed to close in around me, like it was alive, like it was watching. I could hear my own heartbeat, loud and steady, drowning out the eerie chorus of whispers. I stumbled over roots and fallen branches, my mind racing. Was this some kind of elaborate prank? Jake must have set up speakers or something, right? But the more I thought about it, the less likely it seemed. The whispers were too real, too unnatural. I pushed on, determined to reach the heart of the forest, to prove to myself that there was nothing to be afraid of. But with every step, the whispers seemed to grow louder, more frenzied. It was like the forest itself was trying to warn me, to keep me away. And then, just as I reached a small clearing, it happened. The forest seemed to come alive. The trees swayed and groaned, their branches twisting and contorting like something out of a nightmare. The ground beneath me rumbled, sending shockwaves through my body. I stumbled back, my heart pounding in my chest. The clearing seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy, like the epicenter of some ancient power. The whispers grew deafening, a cacophony of voices all trying to be heard. I tried to scream to make it stop, but my voice caught in my throat. It was like the air had been sucked from my lungs, leaving me gasping and breathless. Panic surged through me, a primal instinct to flee. I turned and ran, not caring which direction I was heading. The forest seemed to close in around me, the trees reaching out like gnarled hands. The ground was uneven and treacherous, but I didn't dare stop. I ran until my legs gave out, until I collapsed onto the forest floor, gasping for air. The whispers had faded, replaced by the distant sounds of the forest, the rustling of leaves and the cawing of birds. It was like nothing had happened, like it had all been a twisted dream. As I lay there, trying to catch my breath, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had witnessed something beyond my understanding. The forest was no ordinary place, that much was clear. It was like a living, breathing entity, with secrets and powers far beyond what I could comprehend. And here's the twist, the revelation that still haunts my dreams. When I finally made it out of the forest, when I stumbled back into the light of day, I turned to look back one last time. And there, amongst the trees, I saw them. Figures, their forms indistinct, their eyes gleaming with an eerie light. I blinked, thinking maybe it was just a trick of the light. But when I looked again, they were gone. It was like they had never been there, like they were a part of the forest itself. I don't know what I stumbled upon in that haunted forest, and to be honest, I'm not sure I want to. Some things are better left a mystery, better left to the shadows and whispers of the trees. All I know is that I'll never forget that day, and I'll never look at a forest the same way again.